Dead Ops Arcade is one of the lesser talked about aspects of Call of Duty Zombies, but at the same time it's arguably as iconic as maps like Der Riese and Kiener der Toten. Why is that? Maybe it's because it doesn't really add much, if anything, to the storyline, or at the very least that's what Jason Blundell had to say about the matter during multiple interviews where he said that it wasn't canon to the overarching zombie story. But Blundell's been gone for years now, and it seems like Treyarch's changed their tune on Dead Ops canonicity. Turns out, the mode seems to be a series of arcade games within the Call of Duty universe. So, you might be wondering,
oh my god, who the hell cares?
1, I do. 2, there's a few things that make that really weird. Mainly, the presence of a few enemies in the Aether storyline that shouldn't even exist in this universe. Just to name a few, Margwas and the Insanity Elementals from Shadows, the Spiders from Zetsubo, Nova Crawlers, Brutus, and a few Chaos Story enemies such as Gladiators from 9, the werewolves and vampires from Dead of the Night, the Giganese and skeletons from Ancient Evil, and a couple of others I don't feel like naming, but you get the point. If these games are arcade cabinets in the Dark Aether universe, then how are they able to feature enemies from the old storylines that don't exist anymore? Well, obviously, it's just a case of devs reusing assets for a bonus mode you shouldn't worry too much about. That's boring. Besides, if we go with that, then I don't have a video. Regardless, let's overanalyze. Take a deeper look at why this could be. So again, these enemies don't exist anymore. Most people wouldn't have the slightest clue what an apothecon is, nor should they. But there is one person who might have an idea. One of the 2 survivors of the old multiverse, Eddie Richtofen. He might not ever really have experienced any of these enemies before, but we learn in Alpha Omega that the different multiversal variants of each character essentially acted as a hive mind. Each version has vague memories of the other.
I do wonder how cathartic it could have been had you ever made it to Stalingrad.
Stalingrad? I think I have been. I fought traitor Russians with my big armored tank. Machine.
It's almost like there's some kind of common memory, shared regardless of individual experience. A hive mind.
And that includes Eddie. We actually see proof of that in Tag der Toten, where Primus Richtofen recalls a memory of Eddie playing with Samantha.
A long time ago, Samantha told me something very important. She promised she would keep us safe forever, and that she would make everything okay. She said her dad had a plan.
Eddie clearly has some memory from the old Aether story. He has a snow globe of Dr. Monty's house on his desk at the end of Cold War, and he's able to remember Samantha's birth date and place to a T. Is it too out there to say that, even if they're just vague echoes of the past, he might have some shared memories of things like the Margwa and the Crawlers? After all, he seems to have intuitive knowledge of the Dark Aether and the things in it, even prior to him forming Requiem. But why? Why would he go out of his way to make a bunch of stupid arcade games with these creatures present as enemies? Put on your tinfoil hats, because this is where shit goes from weird to schizo. Predictive programming. If you aren't familiar with the term predictive programming, I'll give you an example. Have you ever heard of those Simpsons predicted 9/11 theories that your grandma or distant aunt might have shared on Facebook? That's predictive programming. The idea that pieces of media, like movies, TV shows, or video games, have certain plot points or elements that make references to events that have yet to happen, so that if and when they do occur, the public will be more accepting of it. This gives us a possible explanation as to why Richtofen would want these arcade cabinets to be made, to get people used to the idea of zombies and other strange creatures staging an attack. After all, wouldn't it make sense that someone who knows what a zombie is, without telling them they actually exist of course, would panic less than someone who doesn't? That, and a lot of former enemies we face in Dead Ops, are extremely similar to the ones we see arrive from the Dark Aether. That explains the Aether story enemies, but it doesn't quite explain the stuff from the Chaos story. After all, isn't it supposed to be in a different universe to any of the Aether/Dark Aether stuff? And you're right, Blundell stated numerous times the two are entirely separate. You could chalk up a lot of the enemies as being more inspired by the mythology they draw from. It's not like Treyarch invented werewolves and vampires. That doesn't explain stuff like the Blightfather, though. Well, it's likely that some version of the Chaos story, or very least the characters, existed somewhere in the Aether universe. That stands to reason that those enemies, in some fashion, existed too. In Vanguard's Shinonuma, we hear reference to a certain Alistair Rhodes, who was pretty important in the Chaos storyline. But instead of being a world-renowned archaeologist, he's an amateur demonologist.
It's
This reminds me of when I studied the writings of Alistair Rhodes, an amateur demonologist and personal hero of mine.
Made a video a while back about reincarnation in Dark Aether storyline, so I'll spare you the details. Long story short, a lot of the old characters within the Aether multiverse have been reincarnated in the new universe. This might include the character of Alistair Rhodes. Not necessarily from the actual Chaos story we play, but some alternate version of it. And if specific named characters from Chaos existed somewhere in Aether, I don't think it's a reach to say that some of the enemies did too. Additionally, we also see a Blight Father in Black Ops 4's Specialist HQ, which is, unfortunately, canon. At least, according to the developers. So, with multiple depictions of these enemies, it's likely they existed somewhere in relation to the Dark Aether storyline. If anybody knew about them existing, it'd be Richtofen. And that's basically all I've got for this one. It's a bit out there as far as theories go, but let me know what you think about it in the comments. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.